ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the patrons and the Board of Directors of Chennai International Center, I extend normally I would say a warm welcome, but today it's a bit wet and a rainy welcome to all of you present here. Yes, warm is also included, but more than that, it's wet and rainy. Probably that explains a little bit of the dullness in the crowd here, but I'm sure it will be compensated by very thorough interactive session as we unfold the question answer session. This subject was chosen after very careful thought, fine-tuning electoral democracy. And the origin of this subject is that India is considered as one of the benchmarks for an extremely vibrant democratic institution. It has survived the test of over 7 decades, and I'm sure it will survive several more tests as it proceeds. Is it completely foolproof? The answer could be no. If there are gaps, those need to be plugged. That is exactly what is going to be the conversation by these two very eminent gentlemen present here, and both have occupied the highest position as far as electoral democracy is concerned. Mr. S Krishnamurthy and Mr. Gopalaswami have occupied the positions of Chief Election Commissioner in the period when India's democratic institution was at its very, very difficult phase, so to say. There are a lot of similarities between the two, and that's why they are sitting together today. Both belong to the IAS service.
No, I'm not.
From the
I'm not in the IAS.
IRS, okay. Both belong to the government
Civil,
service.
you can say civil service.
Civil service. Mr. Krishnamurthy is the 1963 batch, Mr. Gopalaswami 1966 batch, and both are representative icons of Chennai. Most of their moorings are here. They grew up the ladder and occupied the position, as I said, of Chief Election Commissioner. Both are very active after retirement, occupying several positions in non-profit organizations, boards of several companies and so on. Both probably have very similar views on electoral democracy. I don't know about that, but that we will probably test it now. Both are patrons of CIC, and I think last but not the least, and this is not the Rotary Club last but not the least, the really last but not the least is they are very good friends. And I am sure this is going to be a conversation of a slightly different nature, because they are going to actually have a sort of a TV chat amongst themselves, following which there will be an interactive session by the audience also. And I think the most important issue which all of us will have to probably discuss with them in the Q&A session is, as future citizens of this country, in the sense students who are going to graduate and probably exercise their votes in the future, how are they going to look at a democratic institution? What are the challenges? What are the issues that need to be improved? This is the most important question that is agitating the mind of youngsters. So I'm sure we are going to have a very important session. I will leave now the floor to both these gentlemen. They can figure out amongst themselves how they want to do this conversation. So may I now request both these gentlemen to handle the proceedings.
Thank you. I think being an understudy of Mr. TSK in the Election Commission, I should start. I must say that I came to the Election Commission when he was a CEC. Because there's a bit of a story connected with his becoming a CEC. Some of you might know. So let me record it, because I was also a bit player in that scenario. Of course, I hope nobody is going to report it in the newspapers. I wish it should not be done. This particular point should not be. Okay. Just before, after it was known that Mr. Lingdo was to retire, the BJP at that time or NDA won at that time. They had very serious discussions about whom to bring as CEC. Okay. Normally, so TSK should have succeeded without any questions asked, okay, without any doubts being raised. But somebody, I believe, felt that Mr. Lingdo was very unhelpful, or at least very critical of the party or the government. Therefore, can anything be done? I know lots of stories connected with it, some of it which I came to know later on. I believe one gentleman offered, I will not name the person, one gentleman offered saying that you just put me there, I'll straighten up all these guys. Anyway, they didn't do that, but there was a serious discussion. There was a serious discussion about bringing somebody else. And I happened to, I was the Home Secretary at the time. I was called for the meeting, and I attended the meeting. I will not say who all were there, but there was a bit of a serious discussion. The end of it, the then Cabinet Secretary went to meet the PM and told him, saying that not on. Thing which should not be done. I went and I told him, saying that I am going to say the same thing to the Home Minister. And I went to the Home Minister and told him the same thing, saying that it's not on. Of course, he listened. He doesn't speak much. He listened, and I said 2 points. I said, one, you can send a person. He'll be the third, okay, and the other two can simply checkmate him. So it doesn't really, even if you bring that somebody as a CEC straight away, the same thing can happen. Okay. If you are hoping that they will resign and go away, yes, there is a possibility. But I also see the possibility they will not go away and sit there, and then you are going to have a problem, more problem than what it is. It's not worthwhile, I told them. I meant, because I believe at the end of the day they said it's not at all worth it. Okay, that's a for which I was a bit of a, I observed it from the galleries, and then whatever little I could say, I said. Why I am mentioning this is, time to time this kind of a thing comes up. So the Election Commission, of course, from 1 member commission became 3 members, is all well known. Though somebody once told me, I don't know how far it's true, that the idea of 3-member commission, which first came in 1989, was given by the very same person who later on became victim of it. I don't know how far it's true, but anyway, when I joined the commission, it was in the 2004 Parliament elections being conducted. So we had a very hectic time, and lots of things. I mean, people ask me, and we must ask him, was there too much of a pressure on you? And was there suggestions about when to hold the election, when not to hold the election? This is where the whole thing starts. Because today, I mean, you know the latest controversy about the Gujarat timing of the Gujarat election. But during, instead of discussing what goes into deciding the dates, I will start asking him as to whether, on the dates, how do you go around, and I think he can share it with you. Because some of these things are intrinsic to the independence of the institution. And any compromise on that by anybody who's sitting there is bound to affect the very stature and the stature not only of the institution but also sitting there, and it brings down the image of the commission in the eyes of the people. So let's start with a little bit of that and then go on to other things, including what are the latest on these circuits now.
Well,
so how do you?
No, first I should say there is some similarity between reigns in Tamil Nadu and the electoral democracy in this country. We have plenty of water, we don't know how to use it. Similarly, democracy is supposed to give a lot of freedom and liberty and equality before law and all that. We don't know how to cherish it. That's the unfortunate state of affairs of electoral democracy in this country. Mr. Gopalaswami mentioned about the goings on about the appointments of election commissioners and all that. I think taking cue from that, I should mention that first thing that they should consider is to have a collegium for appointment of the election commissioners. See, so long as the prime ministers are good people, they are able to recommend probably the right person or near right person. but you are not sure how the prime ministers will be in future and things like that. But in the interest of a good quality democracy, the present system of appointment of election commissioners is certainly required to be changed. Because all of us have suggested that there should be a collegium which should appoint. In many countries, even the parliament approves such appointments. Be that as it may, the first change in the appointment is necessary because there were certain occasions where they were doubting whether it is true or not, whether they were fair and impartial. I think Mr. Gopalaswami himself may talk about it later. The second thing is the election commission.
I can just interfere for a minute.
Yeah.
This collegium, why? Because there is this itch, so to say. The moment you find the commission has taken a view which is not your liking, especially for the opposition parties, the first thing to allege is, all right, now you have been appointed by the ruling party, or you have been appointed this party, therefore your credentials are doubtful. And then link it to the incident at hand. This, to a great extent, will be squared up if the opposition leader is also part of the collegium and selection, and that has come into selection of the CIC, the Chief Information Commissioner, the CVC, and so on and so forth. It need not be through an amendment to the constitution or the law. It can be done as an executive fiat. But as he rightly said, every commission has made this request or suggestion, but is not being acted upon.
As far as the second question you mentioned about scheduling of the elections, it's a real exercise of a very complicated and delicate nature, because very often people think that it's a decision which can be taken at short notice. So if it is a general election, we have to consult all the states. If it is a particular state elections, we discuss it with the Chief Secretary, we discuss it with the Director General of Police, then we meet all the political parties, then we have to schedule in the school timings, because most of the elections are held only in the school buildings, and their colleges, their exams and so on, their examinations and their schedules. So we have to plan it well in advance, and what is more important is the credibility of the voter register, because very many places there are protests that the voter register is imperfect. It is true, even now probably 90 to 95% it may be perfect. There are imperfections in the system because human beings are involved in it, and so there are mistakes which are happening. Be that as it may, as far as the scheduling is concerned, it's a very delicate and very well done now by the Election Commission, except probably recently when you heard about the Gujarat election schedule, where personally I took the view that the elections for Himachal and Gujarat should have been combined. I am not attributing any motive or anything. After all, I am sure the Election Commission has independently examined and taken a decision. But the point is, when the convention has always been to bunch the election together, when you give an impression that a special treatment is being given for the first time, it becomes controversial. So perhaps they should have avoided it, and it is not difficult. For example, after all the announcement was made, probably within 15 days or so, they could have delayed it, or they could have done 2 or 3 phases elections in Gujarat, because some districts were not affected by floods, and even those which are affected by the floods, they could have allowed, because the rules permit that the bureaucrats can do all the relief work. So it was little, I was not convinced in any case, and that's the reason I said we should have avoided this controversy. But as far as possible, the record of Election Commission in scheduling the elections, I think, has been reasonably perfect. If you really look into the angularities involved of various states, for example, in Assam, you have a festival called Bihu in April. Same time you have some festival in Madurai, the Meenakshi Amman Chitra festival and all that. So we have to respect the local sentiments. In Maharashtra, for example, we had to hold election near the Ganesh Chaturthi time. So we had to clarify it will not affect the Ganesh Chaturthi period. But then they made a very strange request, I am sure Mr. Gopalaswami must have also heard this earlier, that don't hold the election either on Monday or Friday, because it is taken as a long weekend and they don't vote. So these all the political parties used to suggest to us that hold it on Wednesday, preferably, or Thursday. So we did yield to the request and we held the election sometime in Wednesday. So these are very subtle factors which have to be weighed in, and then regional variations are there, as you know, the regional politics, regional parties and so on. So these aspects are taken into account and the schedule is fixed. By and large, I think it has worked well, but the question is scheduling, how many phases do you hold the elections? This is a very important issue. In some states we do it in 1 day, in some states we do it in 3 days, in some states we do it in 5 days. Ideally it should be 1 day, but then it may not be possible. For example, Jammu and Kashmir or Uttar Pradesh or Bihar, there are practical difficulties, there are leftist, Maoist elements involved, special care has to be taken and so on. So with that factor in mind, sometimes multi-phased elections are held. But my personal view is, as far as possible, it should not exceed 3 or 4 phases. But if you have it for too long, what is happening in this country is the political parties indulge in too much of violence and too much of unwarranted criticism, and it goes on for a long period, and then depending upon the performance in the first phase, the second phase is campaigning takes place and so on. So it is ideally desirable to reduce the number of phases, but we have practical difficulties because we have to use the central paramilitary forces. Weather conditions, for example, in Himachal Pradesh, there are certain places which are very cold and snow will be there, we have to avoid that. Sometimes we have to hold election in a place where there is only one voter and in a snow infested area. So these are practical problems, but I would say on the whole the record of the Election Commission in scheduling the elections has been remarkably good.
In fact, if I can supplement what he says, see the one voter syndrome. In Gujarat, right in the middle of the Gir forest, there is a temple and there is one pujari. The fellow takes his own time and there is a polling station for him. Because Gir is an area, so within that he is a voter. If only we could place him somewhere else and give him a vehicle to, our own vehicle to go on there, it would have been much better, but under the law you can't do. So you have a polling station right there. 3 polling personnel go there for this one vote, and he takes his own time. After he finishes his morning puja of the temple, then he comes around 12:30 and votes. In Jammu and Kashmir, Arunachal Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, etc., there are places where the polling staff walk for 2 to 3 days with the machines to go and establish the polling station, because it's a snowbound area and you can't, hilly area, you can't have vehicles going. Then after the polling is over, we pick up only 2 entities by helicopter, the presiding officer and the machine. The rest of them have to walk back, because the machine is important. The presiding officer has to give the account and tell everything. So only 2 fellows are picked up, the machine and the helicopter. But there's been lot of criticism which is about the spread. That why is it that you are taking 71 days, 72 days for an exam? This is one, but there people. Therefore, I would like to just mention the point there. Statutorily, at least about 40 days is something which you cannot reduce that at all. 40 to 42 days, because at least about 7 days you give the preparatory period. Then 1 week or about 10 days for the nomination to be filed, scrutinized, withdrawn. Then 15 days for the campaign period, 15 plus 10, 25 plus 7, 32. Then 3rd day you hold the 3rd or the 4th day you have the counting. So around 40 days is a minimum. The moment you go for one more phase, between each phase is at least about 4 to 5 days. So a state like Uttar Pradesh, You can't, however much you wish, even if you have only 5 phases, that adds another 20 days to the entire scheduling. This is one issue. So 42 days is ideal if there is one state going to poll and that state doesn't create it's not a problem state. And you can hold the election in that state in one day. So people keep asking many times, saying that why can't you hold an election in the entire country in one day? Is it possible or no? So I tell them it's possible. It is not impossible at all, provided conditions. One, you don't kill each other during the election campaign. You don't start running amok, capturing the polling booths, and so on and so forth. Half a dozen wish lists which we have, half a dozen items. If that is fulfilled, then one day election is possible. Sometimes you feel when you go and see elections in other countries, you wish at least that much comes to your country. I went to Maldives to watch the election. Almost 90% of the polling stations had only women in charge of the entire polling station. One. No violence, no problems, no arguments, smooth. At the end of the day, they count the votes there itself. No hazards. And they were very clear about how they went about it. Whichever was doubtful, they kept it in a separate box, showed it to the representative of the candidates, saying that this particular thing goes into this box. If somebody had an objection, he will say that, and then you decide. 1.5 hours after the polling is over, that polling station's record is released, saying that in this polling station, this is the voting pattern, so and so has got this many votes, so and so has got this many votes. Sri Lanka, despite all the problems, of course, counting is a very complicated issue, so it's a multiple member constituencies, but no violence in the polling station, absolutely peaceful, no issues. I wish we had. So in that thing, I thought I'll ask the audience a question.
Now I think I'll add one small anecdote about how the elections take place in the polling booths. In Russia, for example, they take the beer can, they have a transistor or they have a music. In fact, the polling station itself is, they have some music, very mild one, some tunes are played, and there is very little of police protection or anything like that. But I was wondering whether it was an election at all, but so simple. But such things are too ideal for India, I suppose.
In fact, this point about policemen, Maldives, I found no policeman near the polling station at all. Here, in places like Uttar Pradesh, you have to have at least 4 police personnel with one gun, one fellow at least having a gun. Otherwise, election will not be done. And I have a few anecdotes about it, I'll share it later on. But can the audience tell me that if you are a candidate and you want to capture a booth, okay, you're a candidate who decided to capture a booth, where will you do it? You have 100 polling stations, 50 of them vote less for you. 50 of them are the opposition booths where the opposition candidates like to get more votes, and 50 vote for you. Where will you capture the booths? Anybody?
I'm afraid you are having a wrong audience for this. If it is Bihar or UP.
Anybody can guess which is the
weakest presiding officer.
But whether you will do it in the area where your influence is there or your influence is not there, where you are not expected to get votes.
Really, where our influence is there?
Where? Influence is there. Yeah, actually what happens is everybody, most of the time I get a wrong answer to this. You go and get it in the area where you don't get a vote. No. Here the idea is, if you are getting 50%, because only 50% fellows turn up, your idea is to raise it to however is possible. 100 they used to do until Session scuttled it. Mr. Session had a simple formula. Any polling station in which more than 90% of the votes are cast, finished, he will cancel it. So I am told after the first initial shock, they all learned their lesson. They used to stop at 89%. So for innovation, you can't beat beat our fellows. They are all very, very innovative in trying to.
I think I must add here, in West Bengal, when we conduct the elections, you know, fairly, some of the places it's quite violent. So one of the members of parliament, he came to me and said a lot of irregularities have taken place. So I told him, shall we order repoll in those areas? No, 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 please don't do the repoll. It will be worse, he said. So particularly areas where you know, certain elements were out to destroy the peaceful election. In spite of the fact that we were willing to conduct repolls, the candidates themselves, and he's a retired IAS officer, he told me, don't hold repoll in my constituency, because it's worse when you do a repoll, because all the undesirable elements are able to concentrate on those polling stations.
So talking about this, see, the one unfortunate thing which has happened all these years, all over these years, is the total lack of confidence in the local police. Every state, the first meeting which the commission has, they will all say that bring the paramilitary forces from outside the state. We don't believe the. It's very unfortunate. Once I talked to one of the persons saying that you were in power 5 years ago, and now you are saying the same thing. So he just looked askance. That's all. I mean, he didn't want to reply to me, and he was asking for a parliamentary force to be brought in, because he is in the opposition, and the ruling party is suspected to be having hand in gloves with the police, and the police trying to do their bidding. So this is something which complicates the entire issue. In fact, the movement of the paramilitary forces from one area to another, it's a mind-boggling movement. I mean, you take them to northeast, nearly 70,000-80,000 personnel being moved from state to state, from northeast to parts of West Bengal. Parts of West Bengal again are West Bengal by itself is fairly violence prone, and especially the Naxal and the left-wing extremism areas. So you move them through the chicken neck into West Bengal, then spread to Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. It's an exercise which is quite a hassle. If a couple of trains are missed, then you run into the risk of postponing some election, etc., etc.
So added to this is another state where the ruling party itself is asked for the paramilitary forces, because they were afraid of the opposition violence. So they don't have faith in their own police. They said, bring the central paramilitary forces.
So by and large, though, over the years, the influence of, this kind of a violence is slowly coming down. I mean, it's not, still there are states which are violence prone, and Bihar has improved considerably. Still, it's one of the difficult areas. UP has improved considerably. Still, it's one of the difficult areas. Kashmir, for its own reason. It's a central part of India which causes a lot of the Naxal areas. So by force, because of that particular area, we start all the general elections from the Naxal area. Almost about 150 constituencies will be going to poll first, because the entire lot of paramilitary forces dumped there for almost about 2 to 3 weeks ahead of the polling, and thereafter only you can think of others, because you can't bring them from somewhere else the last minute. So these are certain difficult constraints which this is one of the reasons which adds to the number of rounds, number of things. Of course, I don't know how many of you have seen the Newton film. I myself didn't see, but I saw whatever what has been written about it. I don't know, it's about the elections in such Naxal affected areas. I don't know what the full content is, but I can say sometimes the officers there are required to do a very difficult duty, and they sometimes do it mindful of their own security. I still remember 2008 in Chhattisgarh there was an election. 2 days later there was a news item in the local newspapers that in a few polling stations the election was really not done. Nobody was there, and the presiding officer simply pushed the button and did the So we asked the chief electoral officer to go and do the inquiry. Now he ran into a big problem. The local SP and the local collector both knew about this and they didn't want this to be out. So when this man lands in Bastar and asks for a police escort and a vehicle to go to that place, they just don't reply. He waited for 24 hours and then did a foolish thing, of course. And in retrospect, I would say that he did a very brave thing, but at that particular point of time it was quite foolish. He just got one of the polling officials in his motorbike. He just sat there and went to the polling station, did an inquiry and came back and reported saying that this election did not take place. He could have been shot on the way any time. If he had run into any Naxalite formation, he would have been dead. He did that, but that is something which sometimes you become absolutely mad. I will do this. That madness sometimes is something which distinguishes these people into. So, but what is now the distinguishing feature of the elections is, barring a few states, again the poor states, of money. So what the muscle power was doing, much more damage is being done by the money power. So I think we should talk about our experiences in money power. Of course, most of you have heard whatever been happening, but the first hand money power experience is something which is.
Well, as far as elections in India are concerned, we are having some laws relating to use of money for the elections. There are restrictions for individual candidates, but there is no restriction for the political party. Similarly, 4 or 5 candidates are contesting the elections. There can be a common advertisement. How do we apportion the expenditure to arrive at the ceiling? In addition to that, I remember, I think Mr. Jeth Malani was contesting against Mr. Vajpayee. He called on me and said that suppose my friends spend money for my election, how will the election commission view it? He knew that there was a loophole in the law at that point of time, it has since been amended. And he said, it is not my money, it is not my expenditure. My admirers and friends, they spend, what do you do with that? So, money plays a very important role and it is misused in most of the elections, and the so-called ceiling on expenditure by individual candidates is a myth, is a farce. In my opinion, it has to be removed. There is no point in having it and not implementing it, because there are so many difficulties in implementing it. For example, one candidate will say that he has spent, say, 50,000 rupees for a meeting. How did he arrive at the figure? It's all estimated figure. Or he has paid so much money for the pandal or for the meeting place to be erected and all that. It's very difficult to compare, verify, and it's very easy to fool the people. Although, to the credit of Mr. Seshan, we should say, we brought in the expenditure observers and brought a lot of people to go around and verify. Some amount of fear was created, but I don't think it's totally effective because the law itself has a lot of loopholes. In England, for example, there is a ceiling on expenditure for the political parties as well as candidates. It is not there here. That is one. 2, there is a law here which says for every election, party can send 40 people for campaigning. The law doesn't say whether it is for bypoll or for the general elections or for state elections. Again, there is a loophole there. And some of the loopholes are, I think, deliberately crafted into the act, in my opinion. Because we brought it to the notice of the ministry, to the government, to change these loopholes. No reaction. But be that as it may, I feel, although earlier my view was state funding of election is totally ineffective, it will not be productive, but I have changed my views. I feel the time has come when we should think of an innovative scheme by which we prevent political parties from getting donations from corporates and other questionable individuals. Because apart from the donation being given in cash in many cases, and apart from the fact that some amount is given to the ruling party as well as to the opposition party to provide some kind of a hedge, so that in case the opposition comes to power, they should not become antagonistic. So various factors go into that. And apart from all these considerations, most of the parties which get money are obliged to help these donors in policy making, and it is done in a very subtle manner. So I think time has come to curb this practice of donations to corporates. In Canada, for example, there is no such thing. In fact, there is a restriction even on individual donations in Canada. A family can give, only members can give donations, and the family can give only 1,250 Canadian dollars. So there are restrictions, and I feel time has come. Of course, I have a different view that a national election fund should be created, and it should be given 100% tax rebate for the donations. So if there is a deficiency, the government should make good, at least initially, and the money should be spent for the benefit of all candidates in consultation with an all-party guideline, a conference on the guidelines to be framed. If we can do, it is not easy to implement. I do agree, concede there are limitations, there are problems, but probably to a large extent, the current menace of money power can be substantially checked. I don't know, Mr. Gopalaswami may have a different view.
While on the money power part of it, yes, all these changes are necessary. I am slightly on a different point of view on this issue. That is, will that result in less spending in the election in some manner or other? My own feeling is no, because why is it that so much of money is being spent? Why is it that so much of expenditure is being incurred? To my mind, it is because it's an investment. It's an investment in getting to the office and use that office for self-enrichment. So as long as we do not do anything to curb the tendency to use your office and what they say, the rent seeking or the using the office, yes, the accounting part of it may help a little, but some ways will be found, subtle ways will be found to overcome that, because the whole idea is somehow capture power. Once you capture power, then there is no power on the earth can stop you from making money illegally. I mean, of course, our state has achieved tremendous notoriety in that sense. And incidentally, I must mention to you that the first time when this state went absolutely haywire in terms of spending money was after the 2G. The first election in which huge amounts of money was spent was a by-election in Thirumangalam. So it came to be known as the Thirumangalam formula. It was immediately after the 2G scam. So I think part of the 2G money was pumped into it, is my doubt, my surmise. And after that, of course, it became the done thing, everybody into it. And the amount of money which is being caught, I mean, you can imagine the money caught is almost about 5% to 10% of what really goes on. And the other day I heard a very interesting story. So that aspect, I am just mentioning that story because it is necessary whether, despite all this, whether we will succeed, my own doubt. Now here is somebody was talking to me about this, and suddenly he mentioned saying that because I went on transfer to Trivandrum and before the elections, one of the last elections, and I took my mother away from Madurai to Thiruvananthapuram. And he says she was very unhappy, she was ruining the entire thing, saying that, "Beta, 10,000 rupees kam hogi." Because she said it in Tamil, saying that if I had been in Tamil Nadu, I would have got 10,000 rupees. So we used to joke around in Delhi, saying that before the next election, please go and register yourself as a voter in Tamil Nadu. You can get rich for some time at least. So Tamil Nadu, of course, achieved notoriety. The other state which is following very closely is Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. And again, the haves give you more money. The have-nots don't have any money to give, therefore they capture the booths. So Bihar and UP, you will have more violence, while in Tamil Nadu there is no violence. They will all be asking for a one-day poll, because on the day of poll there is not much hanky-panky going on. Whatever is done before, and so much of money flowing into the system. So one, of course, the changes which are required in terms of financing of election, but it is, in my view, very closely tied up with whatever reforms you would like to make to ensure that the offices which the politicians hold are not the places where from a lot of money is gathered. Until that particular reform also doesn't take place, this present, whatever changes are made, will not yield the full result. Still things will happen. This is what I thought is one of the issues which we must.
Political corruption, I think, is altogether different subject, but it is inextricably linked to the election management. And I feel that if political corruption has to be checked, apart from various proposals like Lokpal and the state election corruption, anti-corruption machinery and so on, I feel it is necessary to regulate the political parties both in terms of their functioning as well as their financial propriety.
In fact, I think the right point which is mentioned, you should expand it on that. Now, political parties are there, but there is nothing to control them. I think.
Unfortunately, I think the weakest link in our democratic system is our political parties. And as you are all aware, I think as of now it's more than 1,800 registered political parties.
No, sir. Yeah.
Political
Past
parties.
1,800 parties.
And only about 50 to 60 of them really contest the elections. Others are, I mean, he has got some other experience also.
250, I am told 250 nominally contest, and the national parties and state parties which are serious is around 60.
And most of these other units are either lobbying institutions or converting black money into white.
Yes.
They provide opportunity because they get certain concessions, they can get certain recognition if they contest elections and so when they start political parties. For example,
the money which they get is tax-free.
Tax-free, provided it is audited and accounted for. But then there are so many loopholes in that, again in that system, the law that gives exemption to political parties. I see no reason why they should be given exemption. They are expected to
Interestingly, you can register a party, but the commission will register a party. The commission cannot deregister a party. And despite pleas saying that a very large number of parties don't contest and why, we also found out that in two or three, casually looking at some of the parties' accounts, once we found that there were 2 or 3 parties who consistently for 3 years were getting money, 20 lakhs, from only 2 or 3 sources, the same sources repeated every year. So we became curious and got some inquiry made. There was only one office board, a chair and a table and a telephone. Most of the money was invested in shares and jewellery. They were not very serious contenders for any elections. It was only a manner of converting the black money into white money. But now, even that political party's registration cannot be cancelled by the Election Commission because there is no law. I mean, the Supreme Court made one pronouncement somewhere saying that the law has to specifically say that you should, you have the powers to deregister. Normally, it's the other way. If you can register, the inherent powers to deregister is also with us. But in this case, specifically Supreme Court said you don't have the powers. Therefore, now the number is growing. Normally, before every election, before every major election, whether in a state or a thing, the number of political parties, new political parties registered is at least 3 per week. So it has now reached, when I was there, it's around 950 or 1,000. Now it has reached 1,800 or so.
Very strangely, in Britain, I checked up with the election commissioner there. He says the number of parties registered is 180, but hardly 3 or 4 contest elections. So this phenomenon seems to be prevalent in other countries as well. But when you look at the size of India, 1,800 political parties, most of them indulging in questionable activities. I think it's a very serious problem. So we need a separate law for regulating political parties in India. This is significantly absent. In many countries there are laws regulating political parties, and Association for Democratic Reforms under the chairmanship of Justice Venkatachalya, they drafted, though it is not a perfect law, they drafted a law regulating political parties, separate exclusive law. But nobody seems to have any interest, or nobody seems to have a look at it. Political parties have not even reacted to those draft, and it is lying in limbo.
In fact, even though it's very interesting, right from day one of the elections, there are political parties. In fact, the first election commissioner did a yeoman job, went for this new set of regulations for allotting symbols, because he knew that most of the voters were illiterate, so they needed symbols to be able to identify the parties. So a symbols order was made. Under that, the political parties were given symbols. But the word political party never occurred anywhere in the constitution or the election law until 1985. And 1985, for the first time, when the anti-defection law was being brought in, it is in Schedule 10 of the constitution that the word political party was first time used.
In the Income Tax Act, it has political party.
Politics.
In fact, talking about this, I will narrate another interesting anecdote. I think I can reveal the name of the person who came to me as the Chief Minister. I will not avoid mentioning the name. Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh appeared before us and said, I am the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh minus Rewari.
Rewari is a district.
Another district. And that was represented by a member of his party, but it was a separate state within the state. So this is how political parties function. And our political parties, I think they are doing the greatest damage to democracy in this country.
But again, very interestingly, there are quite a few amendments to the election law. But it will be surprising that there are only two significant amendments to law made by the Parliament. Only two. I mean, all of them, all the rest of the amendments are all peripheral issues or incidental issues. For instance, a new state is formed, then laws to be amended, separate legislatures is created, the number of seats have to be decided for that. So all that gets into the amendment, constitutional amendment. There are only two significant amendments were made by Parliament. One, reducing the age of voting from 21 to 18. The other was not in the constitution, but this one, the anti-defection law 2. The third in the act was making it possible for people to contribute to political parties. That was in 2004 or 2003. Rest of the amendments or rest of the changes in the law, the interpretation of the Supreme Court, not by the Parliament at all, which is a significant point all of you must remember, because when we talk about electoral reforms, that's where the bottleneck is. We can talk about electoral reforms, but who will do it? The Parliament will do it. Will they do it? Question mark.
And most of the reforms have come through the Supreme Court.
Very significant ones. And there, interestingly, there is one very interesting incident there. There is something which is, in 2004 or 2003, the Supreme Court mandated that every candidate must file two affidavits, one of his assets and liabilities and the other about his criminal antecedents. Immediately, the Parliament passed a law against it. They amended the act against it. That still stands in the statute book. But Election Commission doesn't follow, because when somebody approached the Supreme Court said, we don't care for that amendment, our word is law, therefore you implement that. So this is a very interesting thing. The law says one thing, but actually it is being implemented on the basis of the Supreme Court judgment. So most of the amendments, in fact, recently 3 years ago, when Lalu Prasad was ousted, the Parliament again wanted to change the that section that once you are convicted, then you lose your seat immediately. they wanted to reinstate that particular provision of law through, by some other interpretation. The last minute it was abandoned. So again, if you see, most of the amendments have come only through the efforts of the Supreme Court, not by the Parliament at all. Therefore, if we now come to the two issues which are very much current now, one is the first past post system, whether it should be amended. Second, whether the elections can be coincided for the entire country. So I have to start with.
As far as you said coincidental simultaneous election or the other one about first past post system.
First past post.
See, the present system is a colonial system that we have been following. It is in most of the African, Asian countries, because the British follow it even now, that if you have one vote more than the other person, you are the winner. In fact, we had a person in Karnataka who won by only one vote.
There are two more such cases, sir. In 2008,
Yeah.
Mr. C.P. Joshi lost by one vote in Rajasthan. And at the same time, in Indore or somewhere nearby, one person lost by one vote. So the electronic voting machine can lead to such results. A second recount produced the same result, therefore that result stood.
What if there's a tie?
No, it's one vote.
Fortunately,
One
sir,
vote.
fortunately, we have not had such a case now.
Yeah.
So far.
Then it is by a coin. You decide by a.
Yeah, there are instructions to that effect.
Yes, there are instructions in this thing. If there is a tie, it is decided by a. Yeah.
Toss of the coin. No, the point here is that at present the system allows a person to get elected with even 20% of the votes polled because of the first past post system. And I think initially, yeah, in Srinagar, only 15% of the people vote.
Yeah, polling is very low there. Parliament election is the same. Jammu and Kashmir votes very well in the assembly elections.
Now the point is, do you want a representative with 20 to 25% of the votes polled to represent the constituency or not? The present system allows only a person with, and it is very easy to appeal to a dominant community or a dominant linguistic group or a dominant creed, get elected. This is what is happening. So I think the urgent reform, in my opinion, probably the most urgent reform is to change this system. There are various alternatives available. You have got a list system, or you have got minimum 33 and 1/3% or minimum 50% votes to be obtained for a winning candidate. It will create a lot of teething problems when we implement it. But I think in the interest of the quality of democracy, we must give up this first past post system. There are many countries, various variations. Very strangely in Palestine, which is not a sovereign country, they have 126 members in the Central Legislative Council. 63 people are voted constituency wise. The remaining 63 are voted on a national basis. It is all of them, the whole country should vote for them. Whoever gets the maximum votes, they get elected. Though it's very attractive, but I don't know, in a country like India it may be difficult. But proportional system or a list system and so on, we should have a debate at least.
Yeah.
And nobody seems to be interested except people like us who have been talking about it. No political party is interested. You will be very surprised that no political party mentions about electoral reforms in any manifesto at the time of election.
So just one, when you spoke about 50%, we are talking about 50% of the votes polled or 50% of the elected.
No.
No.
It cannot be more.
So here again, here
That is
again.
very difficult because you see, the average polling in India is around 60%. Now, of course, it is inched up to 65. But again, you can, the statistics and lies, isn't that? So, need not be lies, but mere circumstances or coincidence, or some good work somewhere, it reflects in a higher polling. I'll just take one instance. If you have 100 people on the electoral roll, all 100, and then 65% vote, it is 65. Now, if there are 5 dead people in that roll and you remove them, same 65 fellows vote, the percentage is more than 65. At many places, this is what happens. See, if the electoral roll is not cleaned up, then it makes a significant difference, almost up to 5% in the total polling. I mean, you will get a statistics that so many people voted, but the percentage is only this. But if only it could have been cleaned up a little more, then you would find that it is different. But today, I can tell you, I mean, whenever I travel to Bombay in the taxi, I keep asking the fellows, and where are you from and all that stuff. From his, the way he talks, I can tell him which, whether Bihar or UP. Most of the time you will find them from UP or Bihar. But he will tell you saying that his vote is in his village, not in Bombay. I am quite sure also that his name will be in Bombay list, because Maharashtra and some of the states are fairly efficient. Maharashtra is one of the states which is efficient, so they would have recorded him. Only thing is he has a name also in his village. Once during the elections in UP, when I was looking at the electoral roll of a particular district, I found significant variations. So I called up the DM and asked him, saying that, have you seen this particular constituency where there is so much of variation? I suspect that the electoral roll is not all that good. So he told me, saying this, sir, I have a problem in some villages. I said, what the problem is? He says he went to some of these villages and did a personal inquiry, and in many places, many villages there, people are working in Bombay. And he said in one household, he found out of the 4 sons of a father, 2 of them are in Bombay. Not for 1 or 2 years, 15 years they have been in Bombay. But they don't want their name to be removed from here, because those fellows are worried that their title to the property will go if the names are removed. The other 2 brothers will usurp the property. We have no answer for this. The Election Commission cannot provide an answer to this particular problem. So the double counting is very much there. You take Tamil Nadu. See the exodus out of Chennai 2 or 3 days prior to the polling date to Nagarkoil or this place, that place, Madurai, southern districts. Now, most of them will be working here for donkey's number of years. They should in fact find their name here. They don't do it. But at least about 5-10% of them, their names will be at both places. So this is something which, of course, there is a famous Supreme Court judgment in which a sentence, somebody challenged an election, the announcement of an election in West Bengal, saying that it should not be held because the electoral roll is not in good shape. The Supreme Court said at any given point of time, the electoral roll will not be perfect. So if we have to wait for a perfect electoral roll and conduct an election, no election will be able to conduct.
Happening for panchayats now here in Chennai.
So, see, in the corporation panchayat areas, you will find people both in corporation area and panchayat area. And during the 2006 election, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, the chief electoral officer of Kerala, she retired some time ago. She is the cousin of the chief secretary in Tamil Nadu. She did a very interesting work. She applied her own logic and then found 2 constituencies, one in Palakkad district, one in Kasaragod district, with significant variation as compared to the district as well as state. And then we appointed 2 officers, one from Karnataka for the Kasaragod constituency, and one that constituency is Manjalpur or Manjulpur or something, and one for this from Tamil Nadu for this Palakkad. We found people from Tamil Nadu adjoining talukas of Tamil Nadu registered as voters there. In Karnataka, in the border of Karnataka and Kerala, in that particular constituency, there are 5,000 voters that particular gentleman removed. Shivasailam, who later on was the metro man in Bangalore. He removed 5,000 names by going to 8 villages, getting the electoral roll read in the Gram Sabha, and removed 5,000 names from the electoral roll of duplicates from Karnataka. The sitting MLA lost by 5,000 votes.
In fact, another interesting feature of this first past system, particularly in Kerala, they put up candidates with similar names. For example, T.M. Thomas. You will find in the constituency 10 T.M. Thomas contesting the election, just to fool the people. So there is an urgent need to change this system of first past post system.
The other issue you raised.
Sir,
Yeah, I think you asked me a question, I thought.
We'll finish this and can we come back to you? The last one item we'll take and then come back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, now there is a lot of discussion about simultaneous elections, whether we can have it in India when compared to some of the other countries. Very few countries have it, but they have. Particularly, I went to Uganda, I went to Zimbabwe, they have a simultaneous election. But then I used to say about transparency in African countries, the only the voting box used to be transparent. In India, for example, all our politicians are very transparent, they have white dress. But nothing is transparent in effect. Similarly, the simultaneous elections, if we can really hold it, it's certainly very attractive, but it has a lot of problems with it. The most important problem is we are following a Westminster system of parliamentary democracy, where a vote of confidence can result in dissolution of the House. Now, if that be the position, then there is no fixity of tenure of the legislature. So, if you really want to conduct simultaneous elections, until 1967 it used to be. That's because we did not have IR arms and GAR arms or mobilizing governors and so on. So, went on peacefully well, but 67 onwards, Haryana started this IR arms and GAR arms, so dissolutions took place in many states and new governments were installed. So, the first requirement of simultaneous election is that the constitution needs to be amended. And the second is, of course, as far as the election management is concerned, that's not really difficult, provided the election commission is provided with certain additional powers and additional central paramilitary forces so that we can conduct. It is not difficult, but it is difficult to implement unless and until the constitution is amended. The one solution could be to fix the tenure of the House will be such that even if there is a vote of no confidence, the other opposition party should elect a leader, and when the vote of no confidence will be effective only if another person is elected as the chief minister.
I believe, sir, that is a position in Germany. I mean, if you move a no confidence motion, you also should have to specify how the alternate government will come in.
So, for example, people talk about 2019 simultaneous election. It's just not possible. Because there is a problem. Some houses will lapse, that tenure will lapse before the 2019 elections, and some of them will go beyond 2019 elections. And no state, no person in power will like to have its tenure to be reduced. They may be happy to have it extended. So, then the opposition will not accept this proposition. So, you have to find a solution within the framework of the constitution. That one possible solution is to bunch the elections in each year for a particular period. Don't have it beyond that period. But that again is not an easy job. As I told you, the scheduling of the election is not going to be easy. But then, if you really want simultaneous elections, amend the constitution.
The constitutional amendment and consequent changes there are absolutely essential. You have to have a fixed tenure. And then if you work out towards maybe not in 5 years, but in about 15 years time, you can bring them together. In my view, conducting a simultaneous election to the entire country is not a problem at all for the election, should not be a problem at all for the election commission. Even today, at least in about 4 states go to poll along with the parliament elections. Now, there is only one additional box which is kept in the for the state elections. So, it is, I think, as far as the election commission is concerned, I don't think this is a big problem. But the problem really is the political parties have to come together, sit together, get their acts together to ensure that the constitution is amended. Simultaneous elections are made possible by bringing the entire scheduling together, and ensure the amendment says that you elected for 5 years, you will jolly well deliver in 5 years. not, suddenly at the end of 3 years you find you're likely to be voted to power, you dissolve and then go. Who gave you the power to dissolve? I don't know. We all elect a government for 5 years. We never gave them power saying that, if they asked a question saying that, can we dissolve? We should say no. Either you deliver or you don't.
Would you like to conclude before we can ask the questions? Maybe
I suppose,
some concluding remarks.
I suppose ultimately the success of democracy. So the question is, as I said, no electoral reform has ever come through by the political parties. Do we have in the strength in the public to be able to force them to go for electoral reforms? Ultimately, it hinges on us in the sense that can all of us act together to ensure that the political parties respond? Is that possible? Ultimately, the answer to that will decide whether electoral reforms ever take place. Otherwise, we can desire things, but until the political parties, when they decide, they can bring it like nobody's. Just like that, like that amendment which an ordinance was to be brought to prevent the disqualification. An ordinance was to be brought, and of course, when the chorus, public chorus became big, Rahul Gandhi went and in a dramatic move tore up the paper, when in fact his colleague from the party was trying to defend it and telling everybody that he was defending the ordinance. It is a very funny moment. Anyway, there it is. So that's the final.
I'll just add one or two sentences. Democracy, if it has to succeed, has to have two important ingredients: the rule of law and respect for law. So long as it is not there, democracy cannot survive. In India, well, we may be proud of our democracy. We have certain bright features of democracy, but it is not a perfect democracy. Most of the democracies are not perfect, but there are many ways by which we can fine-tune this democracy, and there are many suggestions available, and there can be a national debate, or government should seriously consider setting up a commission to inquire, to find out whether possibilities of implementing these changes. But while we can be proud of the fact that among the neighbors we are the best, but among the world we are not the best. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Do we have a women's reservation in the seats in the parliament and all? I think we have something like that, and because it is very important today, because their views have to be aired, because modernization and
At the moment, there is no reservation at all. There's been talk of reservation. There's been bills moved and moved out. So
and lack of education or something like that, so that legitimate voices are not represented. So there should be.
But by that you are concluding that the men cannot voice the requirements of women. Is that a conclusion you are arriving at? I don't know. I mean, whether reservation, today's position is that it has been talked about, it has never been done.
But some legitimate things, some personal feelings, something.
That's okay. But this is the fact. This is the fact that it's never been done. I mean, it's not passed muster.
So, but then women saying that we are equals and seeking reservation for them inside a constituency doesn't, it looks a bit.
But over the years, I find the political parties have slowly inched up in giving more seats, but still, it's somewhere around 10%, not that, beyond that. Some places is around 13-14%, individual states, but generally the average is around 10% or slightly less.
In any case, a quota reservation will not really give them power, because most of them are not independent to act. At least in northern states, if not in the south.
No, even in the south, I have seen.
In the northern states, there is a terminology, Sarpanch Pati. The Sarpanch is a woman, because there is a reservation in the Panchayat Act or the Municipal Act, but the person who actually acts as the Sarpanch is the husband. So they call it Sarpanch Pati.
See, it happens in Tamil Nadu. I give you my example.
We are aware, it happens in Tamil Nadu, you are
The
right.
guy has been telephoning me to wanting me to meet me or pay some property tax or whatever. Then I went and met him. I thought he was the Panchayat president. And then when I paid up the taxes, the signature was something different. Then he asked, I thought you were the president, somebody else has signed it. He says, he is my mother. That is the, it happened.
So it has to come from the heart, not from the law.
However much law can be there, say it is the person who has got to, the individual has
That is true, but then one expects that, over a period of time, over the period of this, I feel that, there is a separate dynamics for the kursi. The kursi dynamics is different. So after some time, when somebody comes and sits, they may independently act. That I don't think one should discount that particular possibility.
It is changing, no doubt about that.
So it will take time, but
Cost of conducting elections, direct and indirect cost, will be few thousands of crores. We don't even know the number.
No, it's not
But as
much.
a percentage of GDP, how does it compare?
No,
to
it
UK
is
US?
piffle. It's piffle. See, approximately, he had studied it. Now, if you refine that and bring it, it will be about 5 to 6 crores a constituency. So you have 2 elections. That is 1 assembly election, 1 parliament election for every constituency. So you have, let's say, 543 parliamentary constituencies. Multiply by 6, 3,000 assembly constituencies, or give or take another 500, 3,500. And twice that in 5 years, 7,000. Okay, 7,000 multiplied by even 5 crores, piffle.
But there is a study that shows, that's captured the total spend in elections. The interesting thing that I read there was, after America, India is the highest spend on elections.
That is
including
true.
spent on
No,
candidates.
no, that is the expenditure of the candidate is much more. See, when I am talking about
India is the second after America as per that.
See, when I am talking about the constituency expenditure for the election commission may be around 2.5, 3, 4 or 5 crores at best. But each candidate spends 5 crores.
20 crores.
Much more than that, yeah.
Actually, coming on to the Tamil Nadu elections which took place last, Perambur constituency, around the 17 rounds of counting is over. In the last rounds, counting is over. I was inside Laila College itself. They didn't announce it. They were waiting for some other external force to come and say, like it was a narrow fight, actually. So the results changed at the last minutes also in the counting area. And in fact,
The assembly election?
assembly election.
Okay.
And as far as polling stations, it was cool actually. Everywhere when we went round and all that, it was peaceful only actually. And this sort of a thing at the counting area takes place. Narrow margins and this.
See, when the 2 things. See, the chances for of cheating now at the time of counting, the counting agents, counting staff is next to nil, unlike before. Because it's a machine which tells you what is the reading. I am told during the ballot paper times, now you have the trace, let's say 4 candidates are there, you put in there, okay. Now, this 500 here, you take it, 200, 100. When somebody is transcribing by hand this, he might write against 500, 100, against 100, 500. Now, the party's fellow is sitting in front. He doesn't know what this fellow writes. But all this is past story. Now what happens is, each one of those agents writes down, he is told, is read, 1. Second is, after this man in the table writes it in his sheet, it is taken to the main table. From the main table, at random, he will pick any table and come and do it again. You can get caught.
And then video recording also.
There is a video recording. So now the chances for such hanky-panky at the counting there. But one thing is there, when it is very narrow, there is an instruction of the commission that such cases they must report, take clearance, because if the commission is at that particular point of time getting some complaint from the party saying that so and so constituency, they are not very confident, there is something wrong going on. So therefore, at the election commission, they will receive the message, then instruct the CEO whether to redo it or open it, show it openly or wherever there is a problem. So that time lag is there. Otherwise, announcement of the thing, if there is absolutely no, there is a huge lead, there is nothing to talk about it, then the local person will. When there is a very close thing, the commission would like to be informed. It will then, it has its own, input from the political party. The political party might have protested or might have brought in an issue. So that takes a little time. Otherwise, now the chances for this thing.
Very interestingly, in one case, the member of parliament, I think I can mention his name, Sharad Yadav, he rang me up at about 11 o'clock in the night. I anticipate a lot of irregularities. You should not declare the result. I said, we can't stop the result, but you can question the result. So we'll go ahead, and the result, the election counting took place, and he won. So sometimes, political bickerings they keep on mentioning. You shouldn't be, an election commission never gets swayed by these pressures.
So should the sitting IAS officer of Tamil Nadu be the chief election in Tamil Nadu? Because they are biased sometimes.
See, look, as long as he is working in the commission will not let him to be biased, because it's not only the election officer. We cast our net very far and wide. We have lots of information. In fact, if you see just before an election in a state, transfers are made of officers under the instruction of the commission. There is a general rule of these people who have done more than 3 years must be shifted. But beyond the general rule, the commission will specifically indicate these officers should be removed. That's because we do our own homework, prepare a list of people whose conduct is likely to be doubtful, and irrespective of what the state government says, we will say that give us a list of people. That list is only, naam ke vaste. The state government can give whatever list they want, but it is only necessary for us to get a list. But whom we post is our prerogative. So the ultimate posting may be of people who are not in the list at all. Okay. This happens in case of chief secretaries also. When chief secretary is shifted. Now here, I don't mind saying, when one of the DGPs made a comment eulogizing Jayalalitha, we asked him to be shifted. Okay. And we had our list of who will replace. We sometimes, depending upon circumstances, for instance, in Karnataka in 2008, we found the DGP cannot be active because he had very serious problems. He had a kidney problem. We politely sent a message to him saying that, would you like to go on leave so that somebody else can take over? He refused. We didn't want to hurt his sentiments, but at the same time, we didn't want him to be in control. So we found another person. We said all election matter will be handled by him. As against that, in Uttar Pradesh, we transferred the DGP, the Home Secretary, and the Chief Secretary, because all the three had attended Samajwadi Party's annual bash. Okay, we had the photographs. So as soon as the election was announced, we said all three of them march off. And I'll share something. At that time, the governor had sent us a list saying that when you replace with these people. Okay. We knew that the governor was not very, very neutral. So I talked to my colleagues and said, all the names in his list, whether they are good or bad, no go. They will not be brought in at all, because the governor's own neutrality is in question. So we prepared our own list and then put the officers in position. So commission that way does act in a very, very neutral way. Somebody wanted to...
But then when you prepare your own list, it is also based on some information.
Lot of information we gather about, you see, this is one thing which helps.
Okay.
We have been in civil service, so we know retired people, we know working people, people who have worked under us, people who have been before us, after us, and we keep talking to each one of them, then prepare our own list of people who, in fact, I remember in 2007 elections in Gujarat, the we wanted one of the officers, the municipal commissioner in Jamnagar, to be replaced. The chief secretary came and vehemently opposed it, saying that his integrity,
I have one question, sir.
One second, is beyond question. We said no, he should go. We were correct. We were correct because the moment the election was announced, that man resigned and got a ticket for contesting election.
So I have one question, sir. We don't see the democracy even in the political party itself.
Yeah.
They appoint one or two people.
No, that is
for
why
the selection
Mr.
committee.
1 minute.
And then they select as they like.
No.
It is not democratic.
That is why Mr. Krishnamurthy said the
How
biggest
can we
weakest
change
link
it?
is this. So that he mentioned that there should be a separate law for the political parties, which is not there today.
A couple of points, what you read. There is a party of which Venugopal has been Rajya Sabha member for 5 terms. We checked, there was a report. The party got 115 crores, the declared amount, of which 85 crores were given by this gentleman, Dut. Can it be possible that you can buy a Rajya Sabha seat continuously for 5 terms by this type of donation?
Quite possible.
Here,
Who
we have
said
done it
no?
also in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka, for instance. Our M.M. Ramaswamy, who never attended parliament, was fielded by Devagowda's party. He was there for 6 years. He kept a record for not opening his mouth on any one occasion. I think he attended about six times or so. So these type of things, nothing could be done. The law permits the present system. It needs to be changed. Yes, sir. One more question. I met with Nazim Zaidi after this problem of Tanjavur and other constituencies was there. The election was countermanded and the same candidates were fielded in the re-election. When I asked him how they were possible, the answer he said was the concept of punishing them or finding them guilty is a long drawn one. For instance, the police has to file a case, income tax officers have to file a case. It has to be declared by the judicial system and all. It takes a hell of a lot of time. Can't there be special courts to deal with these things? Well, I think we have recommended on many occasions that fast track courts are necessary for this. And secondly, even if they are convicted, they want to be in the legislature. You are talking about cases where it has been filed. We are not able to get approval for the convicted people to be prevented from contesting the election.
Lalu Prasad's case went on for 17 years.
It's still going.
And now, of course, it's he has lost the seat. But his appeal is there. So if he gets the thing, then he can come back.
So
but
what will happen to the corporation and other municipal elections here?
well, if the law permits them, yes, they can. See, the law is different.
The Supreme Court is now, the Tamil Nadu government has represented that until February they can't hold elections. Already the High Court has asked them, directed them twice to hold the elections in particular date. They have violated it. And now before the Supreme Court they are again pleading that they can't do it, they openly say they can't do it before February. Can that be done with impunity? The difficulty with this particularly these local self-government elections, you have to bear in mind, doesn't come under the Central Election Commission. It comes under what is known as the State Election Commissioner. And the beauty of the State Election Commissioner is, he is not appointed for a period of 5 years, he is appointed for 3 years. And his term can be, in Tamil Nadu, his term can be renewed for another 3 years. But in the Central Election Commission, when once the term is over, he cannot be reappointed. First point. There are variations in various states about the State Election Commissions. With the result, very unfortunate, but I will say that State Election Commissioners cannot command that kind of a independence which the Central Election Commission commands.
Can you have time for one last question, please? Because there are
Now, coming on to the two-leaf symbol thing, there are some contestants openly criticizing chief election
Can you
commission.
just raise the question, please?
Yes. Saying that we will go to Supreme Court if
The law permits, no, the law permits. See, Election Commission is not the last word. Election Commission's orders can be challenged higher, yes. The legal remedy which is available will be used. Yeah. There's no doubt.
Last from the student, one last question from student.
Sir, is it possible, we have heard in the news that political parties are alleging that EVMs are rigged, etc. So I just wanted to know, is it possible, and if it is possible, then the VVPATs, that the voter verified paper audit trails. That's an important question. Please. So the voter verified.
You will have to wait, you will have to hear me 5 minutes for this answer, but if you have the time, I have the time. Okay. So, see, first of course, something to laugh at. Okay. The first election which was done throughout a particular state with electronic voting machines was Tamil Nadu 2001. Before the election, the then opposition leader, that was Ms. Jayalalitha, she challenged the machine, the use of electronic voting machine, went to the High Court, lost the case, went to the Supreme Court, lost the case, won the election and never talked about it afterwards. The second such instance was the next year, 2002, when the present Chief Minister of Punjab, Captain Amarendra Singh, he challenged it, but he couldn't, because Supreme Court had said electronic voting machines can be used, so he could not say that electronic voting machines cannot be used. So he went to the Chandigarh High Court and said, we can prove that the electronic voting machines are defective. So the commission was asked, saying that, would you mind allowing his experts to come and interfere with the machine or show the machine is unreliable? We said, we have no problem. And the commission said, he was there as the commission at that time, no problem. He came, spent 6 hours, couldn't do a thing, went back. He also won the election. He also stopped talking about it. So I now say, if any political party or person wants to win the election, first you challenge them. I'll take only 1 more minute for this. Machines are manufactured in different years. 2006, 2007, 2010, 2000. In any particular given state, machines of a different vintage will be there. The machine is actually a calculator. You press it 1, it says 1. You press the same button a second time, it says 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. Beyond that, it doesn't have any great ability. Okay. The software is fused into the machine, you cannot talk to it. You cannot interfere with it. Okay. Now, the names on the button, how the names are decided for the button, who gets 1, who gets 2, who gets 3. It's based on the alphabetical, it is an alphabetical list of the candidate, not the political party. So, a person of Indian National Congress with the name Abbas can be number 1 in constituency. If the name happens to be Zaidi, he will be last in the constituency. For somebody who manufactures the machine in 2006, the machine in 15 years will see service for 15 years. In 15 years, minimum it will be used twice, 1 parliament election, 1 assembly election in every 5 years, which means 6 times it will be used. In 2006, for somebody to think that in 2017 this machine will go to UP, to X constituency, in that so and so will be fighting the election, I want the BJP fellow to win or the Indian Congress fellow to win, his name will be this, he will be number 2, number 3, number 4 in the, and tweak the software in 2006, he must be. That's all that I would like.
The funny anecdote regarding this is, Mr. Lalu Yadav said, only if you press the lantern button, you will get the vote. If you press any other button,
you will get a shock.
You will get a shock.
On that note, I think the most important takeaway for me in this session was, I was really startled to see this data. 1,800 political parties and most of them are inactive. And we are talking about government going after shell companies and.
No, I don't agree with you. It is not inactive. They are active in some other sphere.
I know, but whatever sense. But I don't know, this data, I don't know what the government is, how they are looking at it, what action they are going to take and what is going to be the outcome. But that apart, electoral reforms are necessary, but as these 2 gentlemen very rightly put it, who is to bell the cat? The parliament, and they are busy with so many other things. So, but it's been a very informal but a very effective conversation, albeit a very sort of a thin audience today, but qualitatively I think the session has been extremely invigorating, very interesting for all of us. May I request all of you to give them a good round of applause. And like Air India announces its winter schedule of flights, fog, rain, notwithstanding, we have our winter schedule now in place. 24th November, Mr. Prakash Bansal, IAS CMD of CMRL, is going to talk about the Chennai Metro Rail update. Please mark your diary for 24th November. 1st December is going to be very interesting, a book release by Dr. V. Sumantran, who's written a very interesting book, Faster, Smarter, Greener, the Future of Car and Urban Mobility. So that's going to be a book release on 1st December. 15th December is going to be more exciting. It's going to be sports. Mr. Viren Rasquinto, Mr. Geet Sethi and Mr. Prakash Padukone in conversation. So this is the winter schedule for CIC. I request all of you, whatever be the weather condition, please turn up for these events. Thank you. Thank you all.